Build your cockpit, or HOKAM. Some years ago, I had the pleasure of working with the U.S. Air Force for a while. During that time, I was introduced to a concept that I found to be quite useful when setting up Audacity for an optimal workflow. That concept is summed up in an acronym that refers to a pilot's optimal environment while flying in combat. As you can imagine, this is a high-stress situation in which decisions need to be made with as little interference as possible. To help make that possible, cockpit designers use the acronym HOTAS, H-O-T-A-S, to drive the placement of switches critical to the pilot's principal activities. HOTAS stands for hands-on, throttle, and stick. In a fighter jet, the pilot's right hand is on the stick, controlling the jet's pitch, yaw, and roll. The left hand is on the throttle, which controls the amount of thrust being generated by the engines at any given time. But both the throttle and the stick contain collections of buttons and switches to allow the pilot to do everything from communicating to target selection to controlling various weapons to refueling to selecting displays and more, all without removing his hands from those two vital controls. Even pinky fingers get in on the act. If you've ever seen the movie Top Gun, which is kind of a loose representation of this, you've seen close-up shots of this during some of the air-to-air combat or dogfighting sequences. And this is how I like to work with Audacity. In this case, the acronym becomes HOKAM, H-O-K-A-M, substituting keyboard and mouse for throttle and stick. I like to have my keyboard configured in Audacity so that my left hand has to move as little as possible while I'm editing. It saves time and makes my editing feel as though there's a flow to it. This is especially important when facing longer editing sessions. The key to making it all work is a combination of keyboard shortcuts and Audacity macros. I've collected up the actions that I do most frequently while editing and then arranged shortcut keys for them so that I don't have to choose them from menus. This means my mouse hand is doing only one thing, pointing and selecting on the waveform. I find that using keys in the lower left of the keyboard works best for this, since that keeps the modifier keys, Shift, Alt, and Control or Command, readily available. To try this for yourself, do the following next time you're editing. Make a list of every action you do, menu commands, button clicks, etc. Try to order the list in terms of which actions you do the most. Write down the keyboard shortcut for each action, if one exists. If there's a sequence of actions you do repeatedly, create a macro for that sequence. Now decide on keyboard shortcuts for each action and macro. Try to keep them geographically close and use keys that make sense to you whenever you can. Use the keyboard menu in Preferences, as in the previous Stuart's Audacity tip, to set the shortcuts you've defined. Work with your new HOKAM setup for a bit and see if it doesn't make your edit sessions go more smoothly. If there are sticking points, make adjustments. You can set it up to be whatever you like. Also, if you're not familiar with macros in Audacity, stick around. I'll talk about them in another edition of Stuart's Audacity tips. As a preview, some of the things I use macros for are copy to the end of the track, paste to the end of the track, trim audiobook chapter headers, and trim audiobook chapter tails. Feel free to tinker with those ideas yourself. And if you're enjoying these tips, tell your friends. Everyone is welcome to join at www.stuartgofey.com/get-sat.